Good Wednesday afternoon, church family. Hope that you're well and that your week has gone to your satisfaction and that you are healthy and both physically and spiritually and emotionally. Just a reminder that we're going to continue to meet in person on Sundays, but also continue to stream live and continue to post a link to our YouTube channel later in the day. So I appreciate you joining us virtually if you can't be here, and continue to pray for our nation and for those who've been impacted negatively. I guess that's all of us through COVID. So, I want to continue our study of Ruth. I thought I might do something today away from the text of Ruth itself. You remember that last week that we ended our discussion in chapter 3. There's a marriage proposal that's been offered, and that Ruth has identified Boaz as a near kindred, and we'll speak to that in just a minute. There was an offer made for marriage and also to redeem the property that of Elimelech's family. And there was some drama there because Boaz let Ruth know, and Naomi through Ruth, that there was a kinsperson who was actually closer in relation to the family of Elimelech than he was, and that would have to be navigated and negotiated. So I thought what we might do today is just talk about this character of the Redeemer, or the near kindred, or the near kinsman. In Hebrew, that is known as the Goel. The Goel had several functions that we read about in the Mosaical law, different things that they were expected to do or identified as being tasks that the Goel would have. The first we find in Leviticus 25 specifically. This is in the context of the Jubilee year, that is the year of 7 Sabbath years, and when debts are forgiven and those who are in debtor's prison or those who are enslaved are set free, and other things happen for family redemption of property. And so in the context of Leviticus 25, in the context of the Jubilee year, which, by the way, Jesus speaks about, I believe, in his coming out party in Luke chapter 4, that there's some things that this near kindred Redeemer was asked to do or would do in these Jubilee years. So in Leviticus 25, really beginning in verse 8 through most of the end of the chapter, but specifically in this section beginning in about verse 25, that if a family member had a loss of land due to financial difficulty, the next of kin would redeem it or buy it back and keep it in the family name so that there would be a heritage to pass on to children and grandchildren and also to work the land. Leviticus 25 and verse 48, if a fellow Israelite fell into debt service because there was an indebtedness and people came in and basically made them indentured servants, then this near kindred family member could actually purchase their freedom from that. So you find that in Leviticus 25, 48 and following. There's other things in that chapter that are in regard to the Jubilee year, but most of it it's a financial opportunity to bail people out who, through either their own poor decisions or just through the context of culture, have found themselves in a hard way, and the near kindred Redeemer then would help them as a family member, and there would be an obligation to support those families, and especially to keep family land in the tribal name and in the family and clan name. So you find that in Leviticus 25. In Numbers 35, I think you get, to me, what the original idea of the Goel was. So in Numbers 35, we see in the distribution of some land that would happen to the tribes that the Levites are not given specific territory like the other 12 tribes or the other 11 tribes. The Levites are given cities known as the cities of refuge. They're given 6 cities. What the city of refuge was about In the case of an accidental death, a manslaughter, we might call that in our legal language today, then the person who committed the manslaughter could flee to a city of refuge, would be out of harm's way until a trial could happen or things could be cleared up. And so, typically the person who would commit a manslaughter would be running from is a goel, that is a near kindred redeemer who was also called a blood avenger. And so, under the law of Moses, the blood avenger, basically, if they caught you before you got to the city of refuge, it was blood for blood. And so, this blood avenger was a real interesting character in the ancient Near East and in Israelites' history. In the case of murder, which you'll also find this in in Numbers 35, beginning in verse 16, that if someone actually committed murder, intentional murder, then the near kindred or the blood avenger could act as the executioner blood for blood, right? When sin happens, blood was required. And so I think probably early on, this was kind of the understanding of the Goel, was the blood avenger. After the punishment of the spies and the sentence of the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, as the second generation that left Egypt came upon the borders of the new land, and the Deuteronomic covenant was brought forth. There's another section that has to deal with the Goel in the Deuteronomic law in Deuteronomy 25, beginning in verse 5, and that's known as the Levirate marriage laws. The Levirate marriage laws work this way, that if there was a family that had multiple sons, and a son married and died and his widow was left childless, then the next brother or her brother-in-law then was obligated to marry her to produce children and to produce heirs to keep the family name alive. And so that was Jesus was asked, this question about the Levirate marriage law by the Pharisees, and they're trying to trap him. You may remember that said, when if there's 7 brothers and the first one dies and he remarries and the second one dies and she remarries the next brother and so, who's given to who in the resurrection? It was really a trap to just call him out on the resurrection, and so that was based on the Levirate marriage laws. In those laws, if the brother-in-law, the first brother, refused to fulfill the obligation of the Goel or the near kindred person, then the elders were called to the city gate. The widow, the wife, would then go and pull off the sandals of the ones who would not take care of the obligation. She would spit in his face, and it was a sign of shame for him. He didn't fulfill the family obligation to carry on the name and protect the family heritage. And then that widow would be free to marry outside the family clan. And so the real purpose of the Goel and the Levirate marriage laws was about safeguarding people, that is, taking care of widows, safeguarding property, making sure that property stayed in clan and family name, safeguarding the lineage or the heritage of children so that again, land could stay in the same name and the name could go on. But also it was about protecting the reputation of the family. And so it was a super important position in Israel's history, the Goel, whether that was in the year of Jubilee or involved in the cities of refuge as a blood avenger, or in the Levirate marriage laws to carry on and to protect widows and to carry on family name. So all that's kind of in the background of Ruth, and in Ruth's request that she makes in chapter 3 and verse 9, where she identifies that Boaz as this near kindred redeemer, and then goes and makes the marriage proposal. And there's a lot that's been said about was this really a Levirate marriage contract? Certainly in Deuteronomy 25, it seems to only apply to the brother-in-law of the widowed person, and not to the broader family sense. There's a little difference in exactly if the near kindred doesn't take the responsibility that we see in chapter 4. So I do think that's in the background. I'm not 100% certain that this is exactly what's in play, but I think the concept is in play. That here is this widowed, childless woman whose husband has died, whose brother-in-law, who would have taken then on the levirate obligation, has died, and whose father-in-law has died. And now, so she has no more lineage in the family of Elimelech and Naomi to look to. So is this the practice of the levirate marriage laws? A lot of scholars think that this is what it became. Maybe that's not what it initially said, but this is kind of how it's been practiced by the time of the period of the judges, which remember is going to be, somewhere between 200 and 300 years after the initial conquest of the land in the setting of Ruth. So somewhere in that range. So not certain, but one thing I think is certain for me, and we'll next week get into chapter 4 specifically. One of the things that Boaz does as the Goel, or the near kindred, I think that Boaz begins to redefine for us going forward what the near kindred redeemer is all about. His actions, his attitude, his willingness to be sacrificial, his compassion for others, his responsibility for family, his welfare for the community. That's all in mind that we'll look at in chapter 4. One of the things that really amazes me about Boaz, the character of Boaz, is from Ruth 4 forward, I think there is an expectation, a new expectation of the Goel. The Goel is no longer the blood avenger. And the Goel is not just someone who makes sure that everybody's financially secure. The blood avenger is not, or the Goel is not someone who just makes sure that heritage is protected and land is protected. The Goel, or the near kindred redeemer, is someone who really is concerned about the whole person, the whole family, and the community, and every aspect of life. Spiritual life, physical life, emotional life, relational life. And so next week we will wrap up Ruth next week. We'll look at chapter 4 and look specifically at the character of Boaz and what he does as the Goel, or the near kindred redeemer. Hope you have a great rest of the week, and I hope that if you're able and you're comfortable that you can come out on Sunday and worship with us. If not, we are still working on audio and video quality on our live stream and trying to make some improvements on that. And so if you can't join us in person, certainly join us online. Love you. We miss seeing you, those that we hadn't seen, miss seeing those and talking to those folks that I don't get a chance to talk to as much anymore. But keep praying that God's going to intervene in our life and that we're going to learn from all that has happened through COVID, and that we will have a greater trust and hope in God than ever before. And I pray that we'll have a greater love for our church family, and that we then, after we learn about Boaz, can take on some of the characteristics of the near kinsman. Peace.